See, I'm not like my sister. I need a man to make me whole.
Well, I think I'd better get going.
Married with Children didn't just break the rules, it attacked them.
Good morning, beloved.
Oh, no!
From the outside, it looked like a normal family sitcom, but every joke was a direct shot at TV's fake, feel-good version of American family life.
I thought 2 little leprechauns and a red-headed giant were going through my pockets.
The humor was crude, the characters were unlikable by design, and the outrage was constant. Yet the show refused to back down. It was never meant to comfort audiences or win approval. It was built to provoke.
I don't know, the mood is fading.
Gee, I've been there before. I'm ready.
Now, after decades of silence, Ed O'Neill finally reveals why. A cultural firestorm. When Michael G. Moy and Ron Levitt set out to create the Married with Children project, their goal wasn't to shock audiences for the sake of it. They wanted to strip away the fake sweetness dominating television at the time and replace it with something that deliberately pushed against television norms, something closer to how many working-class families actually lived.
We've been married 15 years.
Oh, well, what's your secret?
Oh, no secret, really. Just to be considerate. Accept each other for what you are. Don't point out the fact that the hair he's losing on his head is now growing out of his nose.
However, in pursuing that honesty, they went further than anyone expected or found comfortable. While ABC, CBS, and NBC played it safe, Fox, the new kid on the block at the time, turned what could have been a liability on a traditional network into an asset. They encouraged the show to push the boundaries. Once they cast the Bundy family, everything clicked, changing the show and Fox forever. Ed O'Neill played Al Bundy, the defining force behind Married with Children. The first time he read the script, he realized it wasn't a typical sitcom. The tone was abrasive, and the Bundy family was deliberately written to be unpleasant. He immediately understood who Al Bundy was supposed to be, a father who is bitter about his dead-end job, resentful of his marriage, and perpetually exasperated by his children.
Well, I invited them over. I thought I told you.
You didn't. Look, I worked hard all day. The last thing I want to do is spend the whole evening with people I don't know.
Instead of softening those traits, he leaned fully into them, drawing inspiration from ordinary people quietly worn down by life. His deadpan delivery stood in stark contrast to the upbeat sitcom dads of the era, and even Fox executives weren't sure viewers would accept him. Ed himself assumed the show wouldn't survive because it mocked everyone equally, and that kind of humor rarely lasted on network television. What fans never understood was why the producers never intended for the show to be liked until decades later, when Ed finally revealed the truth during a wide-ranging conversation that aired on January 16, 2024. Flipped hero themes? During a 2024 podcast, Ed O'Neill explained how his character worked in a way most viewers never realized and why he was intentionally written to be unlikable. Al Bundy functioned as an anti-hero. He was the center of the show, yet he never learned from his mistakes or became better by the end of an episode. Traditional sitcom fathers were made to solve family problems and restore harmony, but Al didn't do anything of that sort. He made things worse and didn't care. That refusal to redeem him was intentional. The show rejected the idea that TV characters needed to be moral or aspirational to be entertaining. Naturally, this attitude triggered backlash. The show's open rejection of family values offended many viewers, especially conservative groups. The most famous response came in 1989, when Terry Rakolta led a national boycott after the episode Her Cups Runneth Over aired. The episode's controversy begins with a deliberately absurd plot device. Peggy becomes deeply depressed after discovering that her favorite bra, the Fancy Figure 327, has been discontinued.
Oh, Al! It's my Fancy Figure 327. I can't believe this. You found it.
This seemingly trivial problem drives Al Bundy and his friend Steve on an unlikely quest to a specialty lingerie store called Francine's of Hollywood, located in Wisconsin. From the outset, the storyline signals that it intends to push boundaries by placing Al, a character already defined by his crude worldview, into an overtly sexualized retail environment. The most talked-about moment occurred at the lingerie shop, where a character named Vicky, played by Devin DeVasquez, asks Al for his opinion on her outfit. What begins as flirtatious banter escalates when she asks whether her boyfriend might prefer the look without the bra.
Or do you think he'd like it better, without the bra, like this?
With her back turned to the camera, she removes it, triggering Al to faint on the spot. While nothing explicit is shown, the implication alone proved enough to spark outrage, becoming the episode's defining and most controversial scene. Beyond that single moment, the episode repeatedly returns to the lingerie shop setting, featuring Al and Steve surrounded by scantily clad women. Al openly ogles customers and staff, and the humor leaned heavily into sexual innuendo and exaggerated male behavior. Supporters argued that the scenes were consistent with the show's satirical tone, while critics felt the repeated emphasis crossed the line from parody into gratuitous provocation. Terry Raccolta found the episode's focus on sexual dialogue and the bra removal gag offensive and inappropriate for network television, accusing the show of being sexist, and her campaign pressured advertisers to pull out. The controversy made headlines and turned the show into a lightning rod in debates about morality on television. News outlets latched onto the controversy, turning Married with Children into a national talking point. Viewers who had never watched before tuned in out of curiosity, eager to see what had caused such outrage. Ratings surged almost overnight, transforming the show into Fox's first undeniable hit. Advertisers eventually returned, and the network quietly reversed course. What truly separated the show from other sitcoms was its structure. Episodes rarely ended with lessons or emotional closure.
Right here, in the backyard, where he was so happy.
Conflict stayed unresolved, and characters didn't grow or care about learning from their mistakes. That lack of resolution was shocking at the time and broke long-standing sitcom traditions. It pointed at a broader change in the late 1980s toward darker, more cynical comedy that embraced irony over optimism, turning vulgarity into its identity. When people look back on Married with Children, two words keep coming up: vulgar and offensive. That reputation didn't come from today's changing standards, it has been there since day one. Viewers who watched the show during its original run in the late 1980s and early 1990s largely remember it the same way it is viewed now: sexually explicit and deliberately provocative for primetime television. Even members of the cast have openly acknowledged that the show crossed lines, sometimes gleefully so. But the vulgarity wasn't accidental, and it wasn't just shock for shock's sake. On the surface, Married with Children presented a traditional American nuclear family. Al Bundy works a modest job, the family owns a home in the suburbs, and dinner still appears on the table. This setup was the perfect picture of the idealized sitcom families audiences were used to seeing. The difference is what comes out of the characters' mouths: constant sexual innuendo.
So you want to go in the bedroom?
Sure, as long as I'm here.
Jokes about masturbation, strip clubs, infidelity, sexless marriages, and outright contempt between spouses are replacing the comforting warmth usually associated with the genre. The most obvious explanation for this tone is comedy. Vulgar jokes grab attention and generate laughs through discomfort. But beneath that surface, the show used sexuality and crudity to peel back the perfectly crafted image of the 1980s perfect family. Rather than pretending everyone was content and fulfilled, Married with Children leaned into dissatisfaction, resentment, and sexual frustration, topics rarely addressed so openly on network television. Peggy Bundy is the clearest example of how the show weaponized vulgarity. At a time when female sexuality was still treated cautiously, Peggy openly discussed her libido and dissatisfaction with her marriage. The recurring joke wasn't that sex didn't matter, but that Peggy wanted more of it and wasn't getting it. This flipped a long-standing sitcom dynamic where wives were expected to be modest, passive, or uninterested in sex. Peggy's vulgarity was often the driving force behind the punchlines. Marcy Rhodes also played a key role in this dynamic. In the episode Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Peggy introduces Marcy to a male strip club after Marcy catches her husband staring at another woman. What begins as supposed revenge quickly reveals that the women are regular patrons who genuinely enjoy being there. The episode wasn't just controversial because it referenced strip clubs. It also showed women actively consuming sexual entertainment. For a primetime sitcom marketed as a family show, that alone was enough to generate outrage. This equal opportunity vulgarity extended across genders. Al's misogyny was explicit and aggressive. He insulted Peggy relentlessly, mocked women openly, and expressed his bitterness without restraint. But Peggy and Marcy did not quietly absorb these attacks. They responded with insults of their own, creating a dynamic built on mutual hostility rather than silent endurance. The comedy lived in the clash, silencing the regularly preached submission. By placing female characters at the center of its vulgarity rather than silencing them, and by openly acknowledging the sexual undercurrents other sitcoms totally ignored, the show succeeded in pushing boundaries that network television had rarely challenged before. It wasn't written to bow to the norms, but to be outright offensive and make people face harsh realities that are often buried. But even for a show that thrived on pushing boundaries, some episodes crossed lines that were hard to ignore. The episode Fox refused to air. Originally slated to air during Married with Children's third season in 1989, the episode titled "I'll See You in Court" quickly became one of the most controversial chapters in the show's history, despite American audiences not seeing it for more than a decade. What was intended as just another boundary-pushing installment instead collided head-on with network standards and a growing national debate over decency on primetime television. At the time, Married with Children was already infamous for its unapologetically sexual jokes. However, this episode pushed those elements further than Fox executives were prepared to defend. The story centers on Al and Peggy Bundy attempting to revive their long-dead sex life by checking into a rundown motel for a secret romantic getaway. Their plans unravel when they discover the motel room contains a hidden camera that was placed intentionally to record guests without their knowledge. Things get even more uncomfortable when they realize that Steve and Marcy Rhodes, Al and Peggy's neighbors, have already been filmed engaging in sexual activity in the same room. Once both couples grasp the full implications of their discovery, panic immediately sets in. Fearing public humiliation and exposure, they decide to band together and sue the motel. The plot itself fits neatly into the show's trademark cynicism, but the execution was unusually explicit even by Married with Children standards. The episode leaned heavily on voyeurism, sexual paranoia, and courtroom jokes that revolved around infidelity and public embarrassment. While much of it was still played for satire, Fox's censors viewed the material as crossing a line. This decision did not happen in isolation. The network was already under pressure from a vocal boycott movement led by Michigan activist Terry Rakolta, who had previously targeted the show after the episode "Her Cups Runneth Over."
Crazy, carefree guy with an easy smile and a fast car. Of course, he wouldn't marry me, so I took you. But I've never looked back.
Rakolta's campaign successfully convinced several advertisers to pull sponsorships, putting Fox in a defensive position as a young network still trying to establish credibility. Against that backdrop, "I'll See You in Court" was seen as a liability rather than an asset. Fox then demanded extensive rewrites and cuts, asking the producers to tone down the sexual content and rework the entire sequence. However, the creative team refused to bend to the pressure, arguing that the episode was consistent with the show's identity and that watering it down would compromise its satire. The standoff eventually ended, with Fox pulling the episode entirely from its U.S. broadcast schedule. While other controversial episodes aired with minor edits, this one was shelved indefinitely. Despite being banned in the United States, the episode aired in several international markets where standards were less restrictive. Word of its existence spread among fans, and "I'll See You in Court" developed a near-mythical reputation as the show's lost episode. Bootleg descriptions circulated. and its absence only added to the perception that Married with Children was constantly testing and exceeding the limits of acceptable television. More than a decade later, attitudes toward television content had shifted. Cable networks were far less constrained than broadcast television, and Fox no longer faced the same pressure to appear respectable. On June 18, 2002, the episode finally aired in the United States on FX, a cable channel owned by Fox. By then, its content seemed less shocking or provocative than it would have been in 1989, but its history remained quite significant. Exposing media sensationalism. Married with Children was never subtle in its satire. Just as it exaggerated the failures and ugliness of the Bundy family to expose cracks in the American nuclear family ideal, it treated journalism with the same merciless eye. When reporters appeared on the show, they were rarely noble truth-seekers or public servants. Instead, they were shallow, sensationalist, and obsessed with sex, scandal, and ratings. Through vulgar humor and extreme caricature, the series presented broadcast media as another broken institution, one that was built on exploiting human misery while pretending to inform the public. The journalists of Married with Children exist in the same exaggerated universe as the Bundys themselves. Bud, Kelly, Peggy, and Al are all grotesque versions of familiar American archetypes: the washed-up working man, the lazy housewife, the dumb blonde, and the socially inept nerd. Likewise, the reporters who swarm into their lives are exaggerated versions of real media stereotypes: pack journalists, token minorities, attractive but incompetent anchors, and investigative reporters who blur ethical lines in pursuit of a story. One of the show's clearest media critiques appears in episodes where journalists descend on the Bundy household during moments of supposed tragedy. In the two-part episode Ship Happens, Al and Peggy are lost at sea, leaving Bud and Kelly potentially orphaned. Rather than focusing on the emotional well-being of two terrified teenagers, reporters break down the front door and immediately begin probing for scandal. Their questions jump straight to molestation and salacious hypotheticals. The actual human drama, the fear of losing parents, is treated as irrelevant. What matters is whether there is a shocking angle that can boost ratings. Miranda Veracruz de la Hoya Cardinal, the show's most prominent reporter, delivered these moments with a wide smile and a polished broadcast voice. Her tone clashed with the subject matter, showing how little genuine empathy exists beneath the performance. She asks Bud and Kelly to describe their feelings as graphically as possible and apologizes for seeming insensitive, only to immediately follow up with another invasive question about abuse. The joke is not subtle. Television news is presented as entertainment first, morality last. Sexuality is central to this portrayal. Again and again, reporters push stories towards sexual content even when it makes no sense. When Al eventually returns home after being rescued by dolphins, an absurd but undeniably heroic story, the journalists show no interest unless sexual abuse is involved. When Al denies it, they leave. In one of the episode's most revealing lines, Cardinal dismisses the entire ordeal by saying that unless the dolphin was Michael Jackson's love child, there is no story. Survival was discarded in favor of sex-driven sensationalism. The show also targets how broadcast journalism values appearance over competence, especially for women. Kelly Bundy's brief career as a weather anchor in the episode Rain Girl is an obvious satire of this phenomenon. Kelly is hired despite being illiterate, unable to read a teleprompter, and ignorant of basic geography. Her qualification is not knowledge, but her looks. When she tries to save her job by lifting her skirt on live television, the moment is vulgar by design, but it exposes a real industry contradiction. Sexualized presentation is rewarded, yet openly acknowledged incompetence is still punished once it becomes undeniable. At the same time, Married with Children does not present this as a victory for Kelly. She is fired. The satire cuts both ways, mocking not just Kelly but the system that hired her in the first place. Miranda Cardinal represents another recurring critique: tokenism in journalism. She is frequently sent on trivial or humiliating assignments, while more prestigious stories are reserved for her white male colleagues. She openly acknowledged her frustration, joking that she is always chosen because she is the woman from a country that rhymes with equator. She was followed by sexual stereotypes as well. Cardinal frequently references the idea that female journalists advance by sleeping their way to the top, even joking on camera that her career might have gone better if she had slept with Peter Jennings instead of Andy Rooney. Interestingly, the series occasionally presents journalism as heroic, though never without moral compromise. In one episode, Cardinal goes undercover to expose Al's fake religious organization, which he is using to evade taxes. Disguised and secretly recording, she delivers an exposé that leads to Al's arrest. The method is ethically questionable, but the outcome serves the public interest. For once, the reporter smiles with genuine satisfaction. It is one of the few moments where journalism is portrayed as effective and justified, even if still theatrical. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.